Good morning. Before I start, Susan asked us to do a brief presentation on what we are discussing here about building ecosystems, and the question that remains unanswered by all of us, which is how and if we create or recreate Silicon Valley ecosystem in Latin America, in Rio, in Brazil, I would say in any parts of the world. Endeavor has been doing some research on the ecosystems in where we have operations. We are in 16 countries, and I would like to share with you a few slides that will be really fast about some insights that we have seen about the ecosystem in Buenos Aires and other things that we have seen around the world. So we did a small survey last year with the tech sector of entrepreneurs in Buenos Aires. As you might be aware, we can. I think that many of you know Buenos Aires tech sector has been one of the most active ecosystems in Latin America, especially because on the very beginning, the big examples, the big role models in the region came from Argentina. Patagon, Mercado Libre, and others were started by Argentinians. So we asked 5 questions to the Argentinian entrepreneurs in the tech sector, asking them, who inspired you to become an entrepreneur? Where were you employed before becoming an entrepreneur? Asking for relationships of investments and mentorship and who founded what. And this is what we have discovered. And this is the very beginning, in 1996, the tech sector in Argentina and Buenos Aires. A few companies, some of them a little bit bigger, and we are trying to understand the relationship between the companies. So next slide, please. Then 3 years later, we started to see some movement. Companies with some sort of investing mentorship relationship that evolves for another step. Próximo, por favor. In 2006, we have seen a much bigger ecosystem with strong relationships between companies. Let's go. And in 2011, this is how the ecosystem looked like. Big corporations, some of them were founded 10, 15 years ago, with strong connections with many of the companies that were founded later on. Próximo, por favor. I can't see the names of the companies, but some of them are really important. Globant, Patagon, Mercado Libre. And these companies are some of the most influential companies in the entire Argentinian ecosystem. Próximo. More than 80% of the companies were influenced by those original 3 or 4 companies. So what happened in Buenos Aires? It's really different when we see the ecosystem now in Argentina, and especially for the tech sector, and how it was 15 years ago. More than 200 companies doing their jobs. It attracts investments. It attracts the eyes of the public sector, and that's starting to receive some other funding. Próximo, por favor. Then said, okay, but this is normal. We don't see this in São Paulo or in Rio happening so far. Let's try to see if this is only something that happens in Argentina, or if there's something that happens in other parts of the world. Then we surveyed Amman, where we have an operation in Jordan, and Istanbul, We have an operation in Turkey as well. And this is what we saw. Next slide. And the last one. Same models, same relationships happening. And when we go back and to the Silicon Valley, it appears to be the same sort of movement. We have the initial entrepreneurs that started their companies and started to be mentors and investors in other companies. And I think I'm going to start with, I would say, Felipe from the Brazilian side. Felipe, why it's not happening in Brazil yet?
This one. That's a tough question. I wouldn't say it's not happening in Brazil. I would say it is starting to happen in Brazil, especially in the last 2-3 years. We've seen a new ecosystem that is being formed in Brazil of entrepreneurs, and especially of this new generation of entrepreneurs that is being mentored and invested by the first generations of entrepreneurs that went successful and are becoming the mentors for the next ones. What I see, and if you look at Silicon Valley, they probably have like 10 generations of companies, and you can see patterns since when Silicon Valley was really about silicon with like Intel and hardware companies, and then you had the born of the software with Microsoft, and then the internet with Yahoo, search engines, and then the internet 2.0 with Google, and I would say in this last generation with the accelerators that started like 5 years ago in the US. We've seen lots of startups, this new wave of startups that are more widespread in different sectors and becoming successful. And if you look at these partners, at these patterns, these entrepreneurs are being funded and mentored by the previous generations. And the movement of the accelerators has just increased this movement of mentorship and networking. So I would say that the success of an ecosystem is also very much about the connections that the players have and how they relate to each other and how they connect and collaborate. And this is one of the strongest points of the Silicon Valley ecosystem. Is, of course, it's the ecosystem of the valley is also a cluster because you have lots of good companies, good people, lots of funds, and this creates a magnet for even more. But the connection between and among all the players is what really makes it keeps growing, and that's something that we have to push here in Brazil.
Great. Kevin, I'll go with you. Excel has been in Brazil not for a long time, and you're probably one of the most successful VC companies in the entire world. How do you see Brazil? And one specific question for you: do you see the Silicon Valley ecosystem as a replicable thing, or something that happened there that cannot be replicable?
Well, is this on? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I think the Silicon Valley model doesn't need to be replicable. I think you can have something that's different and that's adapted to whatever the conditions are. There were a number of us having a discussion last night specifically about Rio. And could Rio be a Silicon Valley? And I think the better question is, should Rio try to be a Silicon Valley? And when you go back and look at the conditions that led to Silicon Valley, first of all, it took a very long time. It was even before the Intel in the 1970s. The first technology company there was Hewlett Packard.
Yeah.
I mean, that was in the 1930s. from, Hewlett and Packard were graduate students at Stanford, and they formed this company. And there was nothing in that area around Stanford. There was San Francisco, where Palo Alto was a very small town, and south of Palo Alto was essentially fruit orchards. That's it. They were fruit orchards. And so you had Stanford, you had some very innovative deans of the School of Engineering who were reached out to industry. You had Hewlett Packard, and then very slowly, because Stanford was sort of innovating at the time in a very unique university that just wasn't just doing research, they were promoting outreach to industry, which was novel back when they were doing it. Then these companies could form, there's cheap real estate and available engineers. That's not the situation with Rio or really a lot of Brazil or a lot of other emerging countries similar to India and some other places. There, in these emerging economies in these mega cities, there's tremendous competition for the scarce real estate resources, for the scarce talent resources, for the scarce financial resources. In Rio, a lot of it's petrochemical, oil. And the oil boom is sort of squeezes out a lot of resources for other sectors. In India, you have similar things. In China, you have similar things. So, where should technology flourish? And it will flourish in a place where maybe there's a little bit less competition for those resources. So, and then what type of technology will flourish, right? What you have going for you in Brazil, of course, is everyone's talked about, is a very large domestic and growing domestic economy, growing consumer consumption, and that'll be, that'll lead to a different set of companies, and has led to a different set of companies than the type of innovation you see at Silicon Valley, which is sort of engineering-driven, fundamental invention. So I don't know that Brazil needs a Silicon Valley. What you do need to do is to do what government needs to do isn't to invest to help startups. It isn't to sponsor entrepreneurs. It's what you need to do is get out of the way, because government is in the way in this country in a big, big way, and you need to create the conditions so that the petri dish can flourish, okay? And the conditions are quite simple. You need to ease company formation. You need to lower the burdens on hiring employees. I mean, I'll tell you, if I run in, you talked about Argentina, when we run into companies in Brazil, if they have an Argentine VP of engineering, we tell them to hire all the engineers in Argentina. Don't hire them here. Isn't that horrible that I'm giving my companies that message not to hire Brazilians? It's the same message I give my companies when they go to Europe. I say, stay the hell out of France. Right? And it's not because French people are wonderful. French engineers are fantastic. There's some great French universities. It's that the labor laws there are incredibly difficult. You don't give you the flexibility to right-size your company when you need to. Startups are roller coasters. The labor laws were all designed for the large institutions to protect workers in those situations. And so it perpetuates an economy of large institutions. So if you want to have a vibrant entrepreneurial economy and you don't have the political will to change your labor laws, which is hard for a lot of reasons, then you need to think about a way to create exemptions to those laws for small companies to make it easier for them to operate, to lower taxes, to lower sales taxes, to lower employment burdens, to lower the red tape. And if you create those conditions, this market is big enough, it's attractive enough, there are smart, wonderful people in Brazil. I love the entrepreneurial spirit here. I love the collaborative spirit here. There's no history of totalitarian regimes. There isn't a history of horrible, brutal dictatorships, or maybe a little, not much. And so the people, they're wonderful to work with here. So I believe if we can create the legal conditions here to just sort of get out of the way, it will naturally flourish. without all kinds of special outreach programs, and it will happen. And then you'll have the multiple generations of companies like the chart he's shown, and it will happen if you give it enough time. So, we're bullish and we're investing despite all of these things. But if you want to accelerate it, that would be my advice.
Wait. Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Scott, going on the same page as Kevin, is it a matter only about the government getting out of the way? Is there any other thing that you see that might prevent, not only in Brazil but in other Latin American countries, the flourish of entrepreneurial, high growth, innovative ecosystems?
So when I think of a innovative capital market flywheel, I do actually think back to the 70s and 80s about what were the conditions that existed in the Silicon Valley in particular that allowed companies like HP, Intel, Cisco to be created. These are huge, massive companies today, but Cisco, as an example, when it went public to the public markets was, I believe, a $30 million IPO on a market capitalization of around $80 million. And so one of the challenges that many of the emerging markets have is, I think, a bias, and I think Kevin said it correctly, a bias towards only the large institutions. And that goes from a legal framework, a regulatory framework, as well as a capital market mindset, that the capital markets are really only for the largest of companies. And so one of the challenges that Brazil has in terms of its capital market life cycle is that if you look at this on a global basis, this is the 6th, maybe coming up on the 5th largest economy in the world. There were 3 IPOs in this economy, on this market last year for the 6th largest economy in the world. That cannot continue. And if you want to create the flywheel of capital creation, wealth creation, and then spinning that back to having entrepreneurs that have the flexibility and the capital to start new companies, you do need that entire life cycle to work. As we operate and work with entrepreneurs around the world, and you look at some of what I would call the entrepreneurial centers around the world, certainly in the U.S., we have conferences like this in Austin and in Chicago and in North Carolina and in Miami that are all asking the same question: how can we be like Silicon Valley, even in the United States? But as I look at emerging markets, and China is a good example, maybe a few years ago. But when you talk to the entrepreneur in China, they have one ambition, and that is they want to create a company that will be a large platform and a meaningful company, and ultimately either a large independent public company, and that's their mindset when they start. And that entrepreneurial mindset is the seed for the innovation, the job creation that's created. And you see that in places like China today, where you've got a wealth of engineers, a wealth of entrepreneurs that have the regulatory framework and all these things to be able to exist, but they have that mindset of wanting to create something big. And so I think that has to exist. I think the benefits overall to the economy, I just look at the U.S. economy, how much the U.S. economy has benefited from entrepreneurship. 90% of job creation in the United States is coming from small and medium-sized entrepreneurship-based companies. And so the job creation engine, the ability to put to work the growing middle class here in Brazil, will have to come from the entrepreneurial enterprises. It will not come from the large institutions. It must come from small companies. And so therefore, you have to be able to have an entire environment that supports small companies. And it's really important in order for the economy to ultimately to thrive and be a global player.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Scott. I think everyone here is talking about ecosystem, but also talking about the role of the entrepreneur and how the entrepreneur look like or should look like in the ecosystem, so they can really fly. I'd like to ask for all of you, probably Felipe and Kevin have a better perception on this, but Scott was talking about mindset, dreaming big, going big. How do you see Brazilian entrepreneurs on this side? I don't know if you know here, you guys, but in the audience as well. Endeavor has done a survey with IBGE. IBGE is the National Statistics Office in Brazil, and we found out that 57% of the net new jobs in Brazil were created by 0.7%, which are the high growth companies. They are not necessarily big. Actually, 3/4 of the companies are not big. They are small or medium-sized companies. But these guys are responsible for more than half of the net new jobs in Brazil. But when we speak with people that work with entrepreneurship and fosters entrepreneurs in Brazil, we are used to listen something that is not necessarily nice about Brazilian entrepreneurs. Brazilian entrepreneurs don't dream big. They don't look after all the things that they need to do in order to improve. We have lack of a failure culture here in the country. How do you see the entrepreneurial mindset in Brazil? And if it's not that good, is it evolving or not? Felipe?
This is not working. Well, I think first I'd like just to tell a quick personal story of how I ended up being here. I think it will help answering the question. But I have been an entrepreneur myself since always. I started coding when I was 12, and I had my first company when I was 16. That was 1999 in Brazil, and we had absolutely no ecosystem. I mean, no angel, no funds, no incubators, no accelerators, no seed capital, no support from the government, no anything. And at that time, I used to see a few others who were willing to start a business as well, and we were just crazy. I mean, which mom wants a son to start a business in Brazil at that time? Come on, my parents, I wasn't incentivized. I was, doing a bad thing for according to my family, my friends. The role model was the ones that were working for the government or for a big company or for a consulting or a bank, and things have changed a lot. So from 99 to now, we've seen an ecosystem that is being built, and as we said in the last years, it had accelerated in its growth, and it's also about culture and the change of the mindset of the entrepreneurs. You guys are never doing a good job by pointing out good examples of entrepreneurs who are thinking big and growing their companies. And we need more of those examples to stimulate others to follow on that path. And this is happening. I mean, I really like this. I think that this new Y generation that is, I'm part of this generation. I'm 29 years old, and I've seen lots of my colleagues and friends starting to enter the workspace in more empowered positions. And this generation is much more connected because of the internet and technology, and also connected to the purpose of the work. So you don't want just work to get money, but to do something that is meaningful. And this has a lot to do with entrepreneurship, of doing and generating impact into the world. So this is a much more entrepreneurial generation that is coming in. I think we've had a tremendous economic momentum in Brazil, even though in the last year the economy is not growing that much. But I still think that we have a huge emerging middle class and lots of opportunities and all these events coming on. So I think when you look at all these trends, it's a great timing for entrepreneurship in Brazil. And I think the mindset is changing as well. Somehow we have a big internal market in Brazil. This is good. But it also creates some barriers for entrepreneurs about thinking bigger and thinking of starting a global company from Brazil. Our entrepreneurs still dream about being the biggest in the country, the biggest in the city sometimes. And I think that it's something that we have to also to stimulate. But I'm pretty optimistic. I've never seen a moment like this in Brazil for entrepreneurs. We have lots of a really good environment if you compare to what we had. We had a lot to accomplish, a lot to evolve, but things are changing, and I really believe that I see that change in mindset as well. It's all about to create good examples, and this mindset, the trends are really good, and they are in the side of the entrepreneurs.
Okay, apparently this is the only microphone working.
Okay. Sorry. I think there's two questions. One is, what are the existing entrepreneurs like? And the second is, how do you foster more entrepreneurship in the culture? I mean, I think the existing Brazilian entrepreneurs, my experience, has been very good, very positive. You know, you want entrepreneurs who have a lot of ambition. You want entrepreneurs who have big dreams, yet at the same time, you don't want entrepreneurs who are delusional. And what sometimes we forget is a lot of the companies that become big and become phenomenon, including, you know, Facebook and others that we've been involved in, you know, started quite small and might have even started as a hobby project that they were doing something for their dorm mates or their friends. Yeah, I won't comment on Facebook specifically, but certainly others were you know, started with kind of humble beginnings or as grad student projects. And then once they saw the potential, you know, sure, then people saw what they can do. And so I think it's actually healthy to have your ambitions be, you want to build something great and useful for those around you and then see where it goes. And I found, like I said, I've found Brazilian entrepreneurs to be wonderfully resourceful, great to work with. I have no complaints about the quality of the people who've chosen to be entrepreneurs, except I wish more of them were engineers. There's a lot of them are MBAs. I was an MBA. I was also an engineer. You need more technical founders because then they're not as limited with what they can do. They can actually build their dreams as opposed to then their first job is to scurry around hiring people to build their dreams. So that's one thing. But otherwise, I found them to be pretty good. Now, this question of, but how do you get a more entrepreneurial culture in Brazil? When you compare it to Argentina, let's face it, Argentina's economy is a disaster. You know, you don't have a choice. You know, the gravy train of going to work for the government or a big company or, you know, Petrobras, it doesn't exist in Argentina. So, you know, by necessity, you had probably a better culture in general of entrepreneurship there, just like, say, in Israel, right? So the reason why the Israelis, in many cases, became such, there's a good culture of entrepreneurship in Israel, there weren't opportunities there, and their market was so small, they had to create something that they could export. Otherwise, they couldn't survive. Whereas Brazil, you know, there's this, you have a benevolent kind of government, quasi-socialist state here, where, you know, so many people aspire to
first of all, you have too many lawyers. You know, the lawyer to engineer ratio is a really big problem in this country. It's the only country I've seen worse than the U.S. The number of lawyers here is out of control. And this is true. As a student in economics, we did there's a regression study relating lawyers per capita to GDP growth, and it was a very negative correlation, very negative. But there's this aspiration here to be a lawyer and to constantly take the next test to move the next layer in the bureaucracy. And the government jobs here are very good jobs that pay well. So they're attracting smart people. And so because of that huge sector, that is sort of starving talent from the entrepreneurial ranks. That said, that's a market issue. And I think that rather than saying, well, how do we change this? What do we do? I think just with more success stories and once people believe it's a much more fulfilling life, a much more rewarding life, both financially and just spiritually, to go build something new than to be, a bureaucrat, that'll change naturally. However, the one other thing the government can do besides getting out of the way is, you do need to invest in your universities more. You do need to invest in your education systems more. And your Pookie graduates, I believe, I was told 40 computer science students per year. Maybe that number is wrong, but that's what I was told. A lot more engineers. How many? 20. Wow, I was 2x high, and I thought that was low. 20 computer science students a year. So that number probably needs to be like 4 to 5 times that number to begin to get kind of interesting. So you need to invest in those programs. And so someone asked before, what do we do with the favelas and how do we, it's not about, I think it's going to be pretty hard just to give them a database of angel investors because let's be honest, how many angel investors are going to respond to an email from some person they don't know in a favela with an undeveloped business idea? It's a nice thought. It's not going to happen as much as we'd like to do it. What you do need to do is to get some resources out to the favelas to teach those kids to program. Well, because there's no reason why you can't. I won't believe that. There's no reason why you can't. And if you get broadband access out to the favela, there are ways they can teach themselves with programs and all the education available now. So that's what you really want to do. Get a bunch of kids who can program who are teenagers, and let's see what they can do. And that's the way to promote entrepreneurship. So those would be a couple of thoughts.
But do you want to join this conversation here on this question?
I would go back again to the point that Kevin was making about university. I'm surprised you'd say it's 10 times more. I would say it's more like 1,000 times more.
It's not realistic to have that many, right?
Yeah.
Stanford, I don't know what the number from Stanford is, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's not 1,000.
But what is unique about a lot of the places where you're able to create startups? Because let's face it, many of the startups that are going to be big platform plays here and in other countries come out of the technology landscape. And in order for a technology company to be able to flourish, you do need access to engineering talent. You need investment in science and technology, engineering and math types of programs deep into the ecosystem. But I also actually think that entrepreneurship can be supported by large companies as well. And the only point that I would make is that you take, for example, the oil industry, oil services, energy services located just here in Rio. The amount of investment in technology that's going to be required for even these large institutions to succeed is largely going to be driven by technology. And so even taking the existing infrastructure that exists in Rio, if you could create a technology community that could even support just that one industry, that would be a significant opportunity. And so therefore you need the educational support in things around technology, but also technology as it applies to geology and in chemistry. It's not just in the computer sciences where these opportunities can be created. The other unique thing that exists, Stanford really pioneered this, is really the notion of technology creation and technology transfer within the university structure. And that is really allowing the opportunity for students and graduate students to be able to create ideas that can be funded and supported by the universities, and that the universities are also willing to have an infrastructure to be able to license that technology out, transfer that technology out, and allow their students to act as entrepreneurs, and the universities to support that type of infrastructure. And so I think education is a real key part of that, but even education around supporting the major industries that already exist here, and that are going to be global opportunities and huge drivers of this economy. Even support around those industries is where, if you're focused on a limited and scarce investment dollar, I'd be pouring investment dollars behind the industries that are already working, and look at that support ecosystem, that technology ecosystem that needs to exist to make those existing industries more successful.
Apparently, all of us here are having the same diagnosis. And one thing that I would like to ask you guys is that when we look at the problem, and when Kevin was speaking on the very beginning, the government should get out of the way, he almost get a round of applause from everyone here on the session. My question is, everyone on this table, on this session, has the same diagnosis. The government should get out of the way somehow. We need more simple rules. We're not discussing necessarily taxation. Of course, less taxes is a nice thing to do, but we're talking about less government and less bureaucratic burdens to the entrepreneurs. And everyone, I think almost everyone here agrees. Yesterday I was seeing Marco Stefanini at Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year, and he was saying that he does the same thing on the government side. He tries to make the connection between what is the vision of the entrepreneurs and the private sector, and bringing this vision to the government.
So why? Who's going to run for office?
Why they're not listening?
Well, someone has to. One of you guys has to run for office. I'm not a Brazilian citizen. I don't think I'd get many votes. But someone has to. You have to change it from the inside. Someone's got to run. Okay. Michael Bloomberg is the mayor of New York, right? And that is having a huge impact on what's sort of going on there. There's, you need someone a candidate and a politician to kind of lead the revolution, right? And so someone's got to, Meg Whitman tried in California, she lost. And unfortunately, the result of that was the only change that happened was our taxes went up. My taxes went up. But someone's got to, try to go and solve it.
Stefanini, you have our vote here.
I'd make just one comment. I mean, I agree government does need to get out of the way, but there are interesting things that local and state and federal governments are making to support entrepreneurship. You go into the Michael Bloomberg example, New York has always been a place around financial services. That's been where most of the money has been made and most of the talent is going. But there's a growing opportunity even within New York around technology because of the confluence of the media influence there. But New York, for example, is providing tax breaks for companies to start their businesses there, or have tax breaks around real estate costs, are investing in science and development research centers that entrepreneurs can use. Those research centers have the best broadband that's available. They have free office space. They have access to technology partners, whether it be an EMC or an IBM or a Cisco, plenty of companies that want to provide technology and infrastructure to anybody who's starting a business. Microsoft, Google, Intel, Cisco, IBM, EMC, Oracle, they're willing to give away their technology to somebody who wants to build a new platform on top of their technology. And so if you can create centers of excellence that are supported from tax regimes, from real estate needs, and create that Petri dish, you will find entrepreneurs that will take advantage of those opportunities and start that up. Israel does the same thing. There are huge science parks. We just did an MOU with Zhongguan Xun Science Development Park outside of Beijing, just on the outskirts of Beijing. And they have now 18 public companies that are big companies that started because the government said, we're going to make an environment here that exists for these particular types of companies. So maybe that's a couple of examples of government not getting out of the way, but trying to create a better foundation for entrepreneurship to exist.
Yeah, well, I'd love to add to that. And I used to complain about the government my whole life, just as everyone. And now I'm part of it. And it's, yeah. Yeah, but that's what you said. I mean, we need to have more of this vision inside the government to make things really change. And of course, the real change that it's about changing legislation, regulation, taxation, and bureaucracy. It's very complex and tough to do. And what my perspective personally, when I was invited to join the government, and as someone who has been an entrepreneur, I don't have the public bureaucratic profile. So I saw it as an opportunity of doing things differently. And at Startup Brazil, we decided to go for the ecosystem and to empower the environment and the ecosystem. Because if you look at startups, they don't have, at least so far in Brazil, representative politically. So there's not anyone to go for the government to fight for the startup entrepreneurs and to ask for these changes. It doesn't represent votes or any political thing. So I think that if we empower the ecosystem, eventually we'll have connected and empowered entrepreneurs who can demand from the government more strongly and more powerfully for these changes. What we've been doing at Startup Brazil is trying to do things in partnership with the private sector. So the government isn't doing directly many things as it used to do. It's not making the policy, but we've partnered with the private tech sector and private accelerators, and we're letting them to do the acceleration and to do the development of the ecosystem, and we're there just to support, to fund, and trying to listen. One of the things that we really want to do is to be able to create a space to listen to entrepreneurs from inside the government, to reverberate, to multiply their voice, and trying to let their voice be heard in terms of what can be changed for law, for regulations, and everything. Of course, this is not something that is going to change overnight. We have a lot to work for, and I think that a good way is to empower the entrepreneurs in the ecosystems and let they have a stronger voice. That's I would say the best way than someone from inside the government try to create the new law that's going to save or change everything.
Well, we have some minutes, so it's time to take questions from you guys. Who has questions? 2, 3, okay. Starting there, Akina, okay.
Hi. It's better. Hi, my name is Amori Gonzalez. I'm a young student also. I'm a general manager of an NGO named Techo or Teto here in Brazil. As you said, I feel also identify with the question, when are you going to get a real job from my parents? So I understand what you said. Well, Techo or Teto is an organization.
Can you speak a little bit closer?
Closer?
Yeah.
Is it better? All right.
Much better.
Techo or Teto is an organization that believes that young people or young volunteers and communities or families living in poverty conditions can, working together, surpass the poverty conditions they live today. So, just as an introduction, we live now in a global network, yes? You've been talking about the networking, the web, we have crowdsourcing, crowdfunding, crowd everywhere. And practically we live in a world that has like two parts, the world of opportunities and the world of necessities. The world of opportunities, well, is our world, and the world of the necessities, where the favelas or the slums are. And my real question is, how can we take this Silicon Valley you've been talking about, or this environment we have been talking, and transform it into an opportunity valley where people living in poverty conditions really can surpass it and participate of it, creating like a poverty surpassing valley or a sharing opportunities valley where anyone or anywhere can participate? That's my question.
Who wants to answer that?
Hi. Well, that's. I think that's the question of the world. I mean, it's a big challenge that we face today, and the answer for that is not always easy. I think I am a very a fan of the concept of social businesses, which are businesses that are profitable. They want to make money. They want to, but they also provide a positive social impact within themselves. I think that's part of that could be part of the solution. So how we could empower more social business and the social business mindset into the entrepreneurial scene. So how can we? I've always asked myself, how can I make money and change the world in the same time? And it shouldn't be or question, or, well, I want to change the world, so I have to work for this NGO and I'll never make money. Or, well, if I wanted to be successful in life, I have to work for this company that is just destroying the environment, is not socially interested. But, well, I'll eventually be comfortable and successful, at least in my bank account. And I think that we have to try to figure ways to do both. So how we can make money, create opportunities, and overcome the necessities at the same time. It's not easy, but I think we have seen a few very good examples of social businesses that are facing this challenging and succeeding really well. So it's my piece of contribution on that question, which is, it's not easy. There's a lot of questions behind that, but it's an interesting perspective to go for the social businesses.
I'll make one comment. It's easy. Silicon Valley is an idea. And that idea is simply that any individual, any person, no matter your background, race, color, social class, if you have an idea, you can, and you have a desire to accomplish something great, you can. And so you teach everybody that has that idea that they can accomplish anything they set their mind to. And that is the idea, and that's the ideal behind the Silicon Valley. And you created an environment around people that allows people to accomplish their dreams.
Guys, just to make things a little bit quicker here, we have a few minutes and 100 questions. So I'll ask the people who are making questions to be really quick, and I ask one of you guys to give a quick answer, okay? Marcelo, Haddad, and Susan were here with asking for the microphone here. Here we are.
Thank you. I have a very quick question to Kevin. I'd like to explore something very provocative meaning and statement that you made yesterday on a private session with you, when you said there's no more innovation on Silicon Valley. What does that mean? The Silicon Valley, you mentioned about there's so many other places in the U.S. that is the real centers of innovation. What do you think? What do you say? What do you want to say about this? It's a Silicon Valley is a myth, or it's a real fact, or maybe it's my wrong understanding.
I think you misquoted me. Definitely misquoted. I didn't say there's no more innovation in Silicon Valley at all. There's tons of innovation in Silicon Valley. But that said, I think there's innovation in other places. There's a certain type of innovation in Silicon Valley. By necessity, there aren't many other endemic industries in that area, in the Bay Area. In other words, there isn't any mineral wealth anymore, not since the late 1800s. There's no oil, or not much oil. There isn't really a transportation hub or a big port anymore. It's not a big agricultural center anymore. And so the whole economy, and it was never a huge financial center, it was a moderate one. And so the whole economy by necessity is defined by what's new. So the Silicon Valley is all about defining the new. And it used to be about silicon. It was an industry around silicon chips. That industry has matured and largely moved offshore. But Silicon Valley has continued to survive because it hasn't defined itself around an industry. It's defined itself around defining the new. And what it's done is defined itself around disruptive change. And so people who want to find disruptive change, people who want to fund disruptive change, people are excited about disruptive change, congregate in that area, and it's the conditions are such that you can do that. It's easy to form a company, it's easy to hire people, it's easy to get that funded, it's easy to find, relatively, to find talent. But there are other parts of the country that have not been able to replicate that because they are, they do get based around very specific industries. And that's fine. And those cities can thrive, being based around those industries. So I think that was more of my point. There always is innovation going on there, but innovation can come in many forms. It can come in the oil and gas industry, and many technologies developed there. It used to be in the automotive industry in the States, not so much anymore. It can be in the telecommunications industry, and a lot of that was based in Washington, D.C. And so there's many different types of centers of excellence that you can have that aren't what Silicon Valley is.
Susan?
Okay, I just want to ask a quick question to Kevin and to Scott. I want to go back to the last panel. We talked about the ecosystem, and that starts with early stage or angel early stage, and it runs to an exit. So Kevin, can you comment as an investor in Brazil? I mean, I think it would be important for you to express to the audience how important ultimate exits are. And Scott, can the international capital markets take this, or take me down that path a little bit?
Well, the international markets have a solution. It doesn't have to be the solution. For a lot of technology, they come to the United States to raise public capital, and a lot of private capital comes there. But it doesn't have to exist. I think in order for a country to be a dynamic global player, you have to have a capital market that supports early stage public companies. I think you just have to have it. A country that has 400 public companies, I think roughly in Brazil, this country should have at least a couple thousand public companies on a comparative scale as you look at other global economies. And so you have to have at least, that's one aspect of the public exits. And remember, when you're able to create an opportunity for companies to gain access to permanent capital through the public markets, they can grow exponentially, and ultimately those companies provide the exit mechanisms for all types of companies. Still true that 90% of the exits that exist still come through M&A, but a merger or acquisition is never going to create a next big platform. If Intel got bought up early on, Intel wouldn't be employing the hundreds of thousands of employees that it has today. Same would be true for Google, same would be true for Microsoft. So you can't just have a market that exists with M&A exits. You need strong public markets, which this economy needs.
I'll open the floor to one last question. Oh.
I don't have much to add. I thought he said it pretty well.
So this sir here with the glasses.
In terms of building an ecosystem like Silicon Valley, I just would like to point out there are studies at MIT and in the UK that show that a federal agency, DARPA, founded in the 50s, played a significant role in building Silicon Valley ecosystem. Okay, by coordinating projects, relating universities with entrepreneurs and experts, and played a significant role.
It's true. I mean, DARPA did literally invent the internet, right? In fact, one of the companies I was on the board of was it used to be called the ARPANET, the DARPA. It was a company called BBN that helped DARPA do that. It's a Boston-based company. So no, there's no question that some federal research dollars, generally Department of Defense oriented, can find their way into leading to develop technologies that lead to startups, and there's a lot of history of that. Israel, if you look at many of their successful startups came from government technologies, mostly around security and surveillance. Qualcomm, a big telecommunications company in the U.S. around cellular technologies, was a defense-related technology, and so there is a role for that kind of fundamental R&D spending to lead to new technologies that become startups. That said, I don't think it's a necessary condition. I think it can help, but sometimes you see what happened with clean tech in the United States, where Obama sort of made that. Once the government begins investing in kind of later stage things and picking companies and picking specific technologies, and they generally don't do that very well. And the private market does that much better. So I think the government should support universities. They should support fundamental research. They should support professors and postdoc students, and that leads to good things. But once you get to picking companies, picking technologies, it gets the track record is a lot more spotty.
Well, guys, just to summarize, I think Scott made one thing very, very strong here, said one, which is it's not about recreating the valley, it's about spreading the spirit. So I think I would like to thank you all for your contributions and ask you guys for a round of applause.